Hi everyone, it is me. It's 5:15 here out on the West Coast, 8:15 for you all on the East Coast. And I wanted to do an Instagram live with someone I admire so much. Her name is Shannon Watts. She started Moms Demand Action, and I want her to understand what we need to do and how we can try to stop some of the gun violence that has been affecting our country for years now, but particularly in the last 2 weeks in the shootings outside of Atlanta and in Boulder, Colorado. Shannon, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm always happy to see you, Shannon. I was just saying that I admire you so much and all the work that you've done in this area. There's so many great organizations working hopefully together to try to curb the amount of gun violence. I think we all become furious and so upset every time this happens. You can imagine just going to a grocery store at 2:30 in the afternoon to pick up some groceries for your family and have this happen to someone you love or to even yourself. And I just wanted to talk about, so many people write on my Instagram, what can we do? And how can we have an impact on this? And I thought you were the perfect person to talk to about this. But first, I wanted you to tell everyone about Moms Demand Action and how you started it following the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School when you felt so frustrated, so upset, and so powerless to change what was going on in this country. And I want people to listen to your story, Shannon, because I think it shows the power of just one person committed to an idea and how one person can make a huge difference. And if you can make a huge difference, what the group of women you've collected and organized and what a difference you have made. So can you just tell everyone about when you started Moms Demand, and I'll stop talking now.
No, absolutely. The first thing I would say is you're right about the power of one person because Moms Demand Action is only successful because all of these brilliant volunteers brought their skill sets to the table. But if I go back to a very cold winter day in Indiana in 2012, I had been a stay-at-home mom for about 5 years. I was taking a break from my job to blend two families. I'd just gotten married again, and I was folding laundry, which is a full-time job when you have 5 kids. And all of a sudden I saw breaking news on my television. And so I kind of paid attention and I saw that there was this horrific active shooting unfolding in Newtown, Connecticut, a city I'd never heard of. And I sort of put everything down, like I'm sure you did and so many Americans across the country. And I sat and I watched this tragedy unfold. And as we now know, it was more horrible than really we can still even fathom, right? The 20 children and 6 educators would be slaughtered in the sanctity of an American elementary school. And I'm sure you were devastated. I was devastated. Everyone watching us was devastated. But I got very angry. And what made me angry was that I saw politicians and pundits on my television just hours after telling me that somehow the solution to this was more guns. And I didn't know anything about our gun laws. I didn't know anything really about the legislative process. I didn't know anything about organizing. I just knew that was a lie. I knew our nation was broken and I knew nothing was going to happen. So the next day I woke up, I was so agitated and I thought, I'm going to join whatever the organization is out there that's like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which was so influential to me as a teen growing up in the 80s. I'm going to join Mothers Against Drunk Driving for gun safety. And what I found online were some think tanks run by men, some one-off state organizations run by mostly men. I wanted to be a part of a badass army of women, or at least led by women, because I've seen that's who gets so much done in this country, right? And so I started a Facebook page. It was called 1 Million Moms for Gun Control. It was only later that my daughter, who is gay, told me 1 Million Moms was an anti-gay group that didn't want Ellen DeGeneres to be the JCPenney spokesperson. It's what happens when you don't have a focus group. Yeah. And then I got a call from Congresswoman Carolyn McCarthy, who told me that no one uses the phrase gun control. So we changed our name to Moms Demand Action, something we started chanting in the early days. But brilliant women and men, but mostly women, came to me and offered me their skill sets and their time and their talents, and said, we need to become a force that can take on one of the most powerful, wealthy special interests that's ever existed. And that's what we've done.
And you have really achieved a lot. And I want to talk about how you guys are really focused on state legislatures, but now we have a chance to get some gun legislation passed in the Senate, if it can pass, in fact. And it's basically, one thing I want people to understand is gun legislation is not designed to take guns away from responsible gun owners. And that's the key word, responsible gun owners. But responsible gun owners, 74% of the NRA actually support universal background checks. And we're talking about getting rid of the loophole that allows people to buy guns at gun shows or online without any kind of background check, et cetera, or, just meeting each other at a gas station and just transferring that gun from one person to another. So a lot of people, you all, who are gun owners and responsible gun owners, this is not a war against those people at all. And I really want people to understand that. And it's not a slippery slope. It's just asking for some common sense legislation that will prevent or at least reduce the number of people who shouldn't have guns from having guns. And I'd love to talk to you about the legislation that's going on right now federally, Shannon. And also, I saw a list of all these mass shootings, and they were all using AR-17s, right?
AR-15s.
AR-15s, sorry, AR-15s. And those would be banned under the assault weapons ban, correct?
Yes, which is not something that has been put forward yet as legislation. So the legislation that has passed the House in the recent weeks is something that it's called HR 8, 1846. It would close the Charleston loophole. Right now, a licensed gun dealer can sell a gun after 3 days without a cleared background check if it's been 3 days, right? And that's how the Charleston shooter got his gun. He had a complicated criminal history. Of course, his background check didn't clear. They sold him the gun anyway. And then another bill would reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. The reason that hasn't been reauthorized is because it contains what the NRA thinks is a poison pill, which is to deem stalkers and dating partners as prohibited purchasers. Common sense, right? You're just as likely to be killed by a partner as who you're dating, who is dangerous and armed, as you are if you are married. This would protect women, and yet it has been something that Mitch McConnell would not allow to get a vote in the Senate. Any of those bills when he was in charge. Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, Majority Leader Schumer now has promised that those bills will get votes on the Senate floor. You were talking about mass shootings. What we're seeing unfolding is so shameful. I mean, only in America, when you return to normal activities after a pandemic, does that also include public shootings. We actually saw mass shootings slow down last year in 2020 because people weren't really out in public or gathering in their homes. But it was the most deadly year on record in our nation's history for gun violence. And that's because of city gun violence, gun suicides, domestic gun violence, unintentional shootings. And there were at least 50 million background checks performed last year as well, right? So we already had 400 million guns in circulation. Many of these people who are buying these guns don't live in states that require a background check or training or permitting. So this is sort of the logical outcome of allowing gun lobbyists to write our gun laws and giving every civilian easy access to guns, no questions asked.
Hasn't the NRA been significantly weakened because of financial malfeasance and all kinds of things that have really kind of upended the organization? And do they have as much power and as much money to pay members of Congress to fight against these laws as they once did? And, because my understanding was they were being significantly weakened.
Well, so I just want to talk about a movie that you made called Under the Gun, which I thought really shed a light on how insidious the gun lobby has been through the decades and doing everything they can to weaken our gun laws while simultaneously selling millions and millions of guns to Americans. And I suggest people watch that because I do think it's an important primer. But yes, the NRA is right now weaker than they've ever been. They are under investigation on many fronts for self-dealing, for mismanagement of their so-called nonprofit status. William LaPierre, who makes millions of dollars, is the leader of a nonprofit, buys Italian suits for $30,000 in Beverly Hills. Like this isn't how most nonprofits act. And on top of that, they're under investigation for being a foreign asset. So they are weakened politically, right? What used to be a badge of honor, an A rating from the NRA, is now a scarlet letter. But there are still some senators who are beholden to the gun lobby because they're trying to court the extreme right or because they're getting millions of dollars from the gun lobby. So our organization has worked very hard over the last 8.5 years to loosen the stranglehold finger by finger that the gun lobby has on our lawmakers. And in fact, if you go back to when Obama was elected, President Obama in 2008, a quarter of all Democrats in Congress had an A rating from the NRA. Today, not one does. And so this is how this change happens, right? It's like drips on a rock, showing up at every gun bill hearing, having relationships with your lawmakers, showing them when they do the right thing, you'll have their back. When they do the wrong thing, you'll have their job. And it takes several election cycles, but that's what's gotten us to this opportunity now to finally have change at a federal level.
Let's talk about, are you optimistic that the Senate will pass some reasonable gun legislation, i.e. Closing the loopholes with the universal background check that we just talked about, Shannon?
I am always optimistic. I am always hopeful. I think there will be negotiations around the bills that have passed the House. I can tell you that we're having conversations with the White House. We're having conversations with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. There is more support for background checks in the Senate than you may expect.
Are you saying some moderate Republicans?
Some moderate Republicans, some retiring Republicans. We're doing our best to whip those votes and to get to a place where we can pass background checks. All of that said, there is not a corner of the Biden administration or the Justice Department that can't be doing something right now today. And that includes executive actions. The president could immediately strengthen the background check system through executive action. He could regulate the market for ghost guns. He could put forward funding for these gun violence intervention programs in city centers that are so crucial to addressing gun violence rates right now.
So, by the way, that's like Sandy Hook Promise, which our friend Mark Barden started after his son was murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary School. That's an early intervention program to make sure that if there's conversations about guns at schools, that kids know to report it to the authorities. And they have thwarted several really scary situations. Who knows what would have happened, Shannon, but they've been very successful.
It's true. But also, and then a lot of that is around, mass shootings. And most school shooters are students with easy access to unsecured guns in their homes. But also, the daily gun violence that's happening, in particular in Black and brown communities. Where I live near Oakland, there's a group called Youth Alive, and they train teens to go into the schools and interrupt gun violence before it begins. And those programs, for example, in California, were only getting about $9 million a year. And we worked with other advocates to go in and fight for and unlock triple the amount of that funding so that they would have the ability to do the work that they're doing that's so successul.
Someone asked what ghost guns are in the comments, and I thought you should explain what you mean by that. Also, by the way, I want you to address, Shannon, many people in this conversation are pointing to mental health. But that is in many ways a red herring, and I want you to explain why.
Sure.
But first, why don't you do ghost gun, and then you can talk about mental health.
So ghost guns are one of the fastest growing crises in this country, and that is unmarked parts that are used to put together deadly weapons that are untraceable. And we have seen this more and more in cities all across the country. We think that they should be regulated just like regular guns, that you should have to have a background check when you have a ghost gun. It's how many crimes are being committed. And actually just this week, 18 attorney generals, or is it attorneys general? I always get that wrong, but they wrote a letter.
It's attorneys general.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They wrote a letter requesting action from the Biden administration on this issue because it is a scourge in their communities. In terms of mental health, I've been watching media coverage of these two recent mass shootings, and we're seeing again some Republican senators blaming idiocy. I think that's what John Kennedy called it, Senator Kennedy, mental illness. Ted Cruz was blaming actually gun laws for causing gun violence.
I saw that.
We always see these straw men that pop up over and over again. In terms of mental illness, we have the same rates of mental illness per capita as every other high-income country. Every other high-income country. What we have, though, also is a 25 times higher gun homicide rate than any other high-income country. Why? Because we have easy access to guns, and we know that. We know that through data, through research. Often we hear people who have these anecdotes and have reasons for what they believe around guns. Data and research shows us what is causing gun violence and how we can solve it.
So thank you for pointing that out, because I think that is often the default position of many well-meaning people.
Yes.
Who just don't really understand that it's the mental illness. Of course, we have to deal with mental health and mental illness in this country in a very, honest and upfront way. But it really is very simply easy access to guns. That
Yes.
that is what is responsible for the high level, the extraordinary and really incomparably high level of gun violence in our country compared to many other countries who have had mass shootings and have taken significant action. Oops, Shannon's frozen. She's coming back around. I have some questions, you guys, from social media. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, people who are mentally ill are much more likely to be victims of violent crime than perpetrators.
That's such an important point, too. So, I was just saying, and you froze for a second, Shannon, about how other countries have had mass shootings and have taken significant action to reduce gun violence. Can you just talk about that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, for example, in New Zealand, right, when they had a mass shooting, their prime minister acted very quickly. But we also have something else that no other high-income country has, and that is a gun lobby. So we have this organization that has spent decades protecting gun manufacturers using chaos and natural disasters and pandemics to juice gun sales in order to enrich gun manufacturers. No other country has gun lobbyists essentially helping to write their nation's gun laws. And so that's why it's so important to take their power away, because it's easier to pass laws that will keep everyone safe, not to infringe on Second Amendment rights. We support the Second Amendment. Many of our volunteers are gun owners, or their partners are gun owners. This is just about restoring the responsibilities that should go along with gun rights.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I can't emphasize enough that when people write in my comments, if you're going to try to take our guns away, there will be a civil war. This is not what these efforts are about. They're about, you have to have a driver's license in order to drive a car. It is just actually tightening laws to make sure you're never going to completely reduce gun violence in this country. That is clearly, a panacea that we cannot reach. But we can really significantly reduce the amount of gun violence. And in fact, states that have stricter gun laws have fewer violent gun deaths.
That's exactly right. And Senator Kennedy was also comparing this issue to drunk driving and traffic accidents. When you go back to how we were able to reduce traffic accidents in this country, it wasn't one thing. It wasn't like somehow forcing people to wear a seatbelt or requiring them to solve our issue. It was seatbelts, speed limits, rumble strips, better car technology, a whole host of things that is a safety net. We haven't even trying to stop gun violence in this country. And it will require a whole host of solutions that we've seen through data work when they're applied in the states. And so the idea that one specific law, that's the question I always get. What law would have stopped that shooting tragedy? Well, we don't know, because first of all, the NRA made sure we didn't have a lot of money for research. But on top of that, it might be a whole host of things. It might be that safety net.
And the CDC was prevented from studying gun violence as a public health crisis, and now that has been lifted, is my understanding, that they're now able to use their funding to study it, just as they studied traffic accidents
Yes.
and highway fatalities, which led to seatbelt laws. Someone else was saying about mental health is an issue because so many gun deaths are suicide.
Yes.
So I do have a hard time parsing this. And I understand that, what you're saying about mental illness, and people who have mental illness are more likely to be victims than perpetrators. And the fact that we have the same amount of mental illness as other countries. But is there a way to address people who are unstable, who maybe are having mental and emotional issues, taking their own lives or turning guns onto other people? Because honestly, Shannon, I've been studying this for so long, and I'm not nearly the expert you are, but I know a fair amount about it because of that documentary. And it seems to me that there has to be something that addresses mental health and preventing people
Yeah.
who are having mental health issues from getting their hands on these deadly weapons.
Yeah. And so just as I mentioned that we have the same rates of mental illness per capita as other high income countries, we also have the similar numbers of suicide attempts. What we have that's different is the number of fatalities resulting from suicide. Why? Because we have easy access to guns, and guns make suicide so much more fatal. In fact, studies show that people in other countries who attempt suicide do not try again. They get the help they need. They are able to go on with their lives. In America, that's not the case, because when you try to kill yourself with a gun, it's over 90% fatal. There are some legislative solutions, for example, red flag laws. We've passed those now in 19 states. The first one we passed was in California after the horrific UCSB shooting. That was more of a person who was a danger to other people. But when someone is a danger to themselves, red flag laws allow families or police to petition a judge to get a temporary restraining order that allows them to remove the guns from someone who is a risk to themselves or others. These have been found to be constitutional. I get that a lot. They do include due process. Even in states like Indiana, they've gone to court. They've been found to be constitutional. They have pretty broad bipartisan support. Marco Rubio wanted to pass one federally after Parkland. They did pass one in Florida. But there are different potential solutions to making sure that people who are having suicidal ideation don't have easy access to guns.
And what would those be, Shannon?
Well, there's all kinds of programs, right? Intervention. We know veterans, for example, are at high risk. And interestingly, the NRA went into Florida. I always say California is the gun violence prevention movement's petri dish. Florida is the NRA's. They go in there and try to pass the worst state laws they can and then extrapolate those to the rest of the country. And so they were able to pass a law in Florida that prevented physicians from talking to their patients about whether they had guns and how those guns were stored. And it passed, and it was signed into law by the governor. And it was eventually overturned by the Florida Supreme Court. But making sure that people have the resources and the counseling they need and conversations with their physicians is hugely important. And bizarrely, it's something the gun lobby wants to stop.
This, people are asking about the documentary. It's called Under the Gun. Shannon is one of the characters in the documentary. We followed her doing her incredible work with Moms Demand. The movement has grown by leaps and bounds since we did that documentary in the last 5 years. So that documentary came out in 2016, and I believe it's available on Amazon. Let me get to some social media questions and end with asking you what people can do. What is the most effective thing to do for people who want to get involved? But let me just, and I'll end with what can we do now to make a difference, which is something that we got from many people. But one person asked, my Florida senator opposes sensible gun laws. What else can I do? Well, obviously, campaign against that senator.
Yeah, I mean, there's really 3 buckets that we work in. First is electoral. So we support gun sense candidates, and we oppose those who do not support gun safety. So we get involved at the state and federal level every single election cycle. Believe it or not, midterms are around the corner. So we need everybody to get off the sidelines and get involved there, because we should be holding those lawmakers accountable. And also, you can run for office. We had 100 Moms Demand Action volunteers run for office in 2020, 43 won, everything from city council to Congress. We've got two members.
Lucy McBath won.
Lucy McBath.
Lucy McBath's son, everyone, Jordan, was murdered in Florida by someone who shot a gun into the car because the music they were playing was too loud. It was a horrific, just unconscionable. I mean, there are no words. But Lucy then took her outrage and grief and channeled it into action and ran for office. So sorry to interrupt, but
no, she was a Moms Demand Action volunteer for years, and ran for Congress and won. Marie Newman, the congresswoman from Illinois, was a Moms Demand Action volunteer. We have many now sitting in state houses, city councils, school boards. And so the other piece of it is legislative, showing up at state houses. Most legislative seasons are still in session. And every year, the NRA tries to put guns in our schools, on our college campuses, eradicate permitting systems, pass stand your ground. So we have to beat back their agenda. And then we have to work to pass good gun legislation.
And I saw that Gabby Giffords has started an organization promoting sensible gun laws for gun owners. And I think that is so key because, as I mentioned, 74% of the NRA, at least when we did the documentary, supported sensible gun laws. So it's the leadership of the NRA who are really in bed with gun manufacturers. They're the ones who are preventing sensible gun laws. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, 93% of Americans support a background check on every gun sale. 89% of gun owners, only 1 in 10 even belongs to the NRA. 87% of Republicans. Like, I can't think of another issue in this country that has that much consensus.
Let me do a couple of other social media questions and then we'll wrap it up. Someone is asking, how do we prevent the NRA from having so much power when it comes to legislation? I imagine you're going to say, fight back with more power.
Yep.
Right?
You got to join us. Strength in numbers. We're mothers and others. We're not just moms. We're not just women. We show up at every gun bill hearing, every meeting in every state house around guns with our red shirts on. And we say, not in our community. You will not pass this legislation where we live. And I'm telling you, it works. We have become, we were the David to the NRA's Goliath, and now we're beating them.
Someone asked, why can't we do what all the other countries did after their very first mass murders? I think you answered that question because of the gun lobby. How do I best protect my kids in a state with loose gun laws? We live in Tennessee.
I'm sorry, because Tennessee is working right now to pass permitless carry. I would ask your governor to veto that bill. But I don't know what to say. I mean, we have to keep showing up and we have to beat back the gun lobby. We have undone some of this bad legislation in some states. Right now, we're working to roll back Stand Your Ground in Georgia after the horrific shooting deaths that happened there. We can undo this damage, but again, it takes everyone getting off the sidelines and focusing specifically on this issue.
Someone else asked, without federal action, gun reform is going to have to begin with municipalities. I think that's one of the things that you've shown, going state by state by state, working in all different places. But this person asked, what can towns, cities, and counties do to enact gun reform at the local level? If they join Moms Demand, Shannon,
yes,
they will be put with a group that is fighting this fight locally, correct?
Yep, in their city, in their community. It's such a complicated question because there are something called preemption laws in over 40 states in this country. We're actually dealing with that in Boulder right now. When I was living in Boulder, Moms Demand Action volunteers helped pass a municipal ban on assault weapons there. The NRA fought, they were part of a suit to undo that ban. The judge overturned it 2 weeks before this horrific shooting at King Soopers. So the NRA fights us tooth and nail where we make progress. But again, we are able to beat them back at the city, state, and federal level. The more people that we have engaged, the more, the success we'll have. And you were asking me about what people can do. I read an article once about an activist who made sandwiches for homeless people. And she said in this article, I get so many people thanking me and giving me donations to make sandwiches. And what I want to say to them is, make your own damn sandwiches, right? So you can't just post on Facebook. You can't just tweet. Like, you need to give at least an hour of your time, a week, a month. It all matters. It's like drips on a rock. You got to get engaged on this issue because we are all in danger right now. You may think you live in a safe community. I'm telling you, I lived in Boulder. I thought I lived in a safe community. Because the gun lobby's agenda, none of us are safe right now. And so get off the sidelines, get involved in Moms Demand Action. You can go to our website, momsdemandaction.org. Again, we're Mothers and Others. We have Students Demand Action. And the other thing that you can do is text the word CHECKS, CHECKS, to 64433, and we will immediately connect you to your senators, and you can have a conversation about why it's so important that they vote yes on the legislation that has passed the House, and that you're going to hold them accountable if they don't.
I think that's great advice, because I know when I did the Under the Gun, I interviewed Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly, and Gabby and Mark were saying, you know, you don't think that your members, that you don't believe that your senator or your representative really pays attention when you call. And that is not true.
Yep.
They actually listen to constituents when they call, and they keep track of it. So it's, again, it's 644, someone nice,
64433. Text the word CHECKS. I see lots of Moms Demand Action volunteers making sure we all know.
Yeah, and I am going to, you know, I'm a big supporter. I'm going to join just as an individual, so I can spread the word. I'm happy to use my platform to educate people so they understand that this is not a threat to the Second Amendment. It is actually to ensure the safety of our mothers and sisters and children. You know, it's just so upsetting.
Yes, it is upsetting. And Katie, I just want to, I know we're wrapping up, but I need to say thank you to you. You have been such a champion of Moms Demand Action. I mean, you had me on your show when we were like, nobody knew who we were. I was like some rando from Indiana. And you had me on your show, and you have been supportive of us every step of the way. So you're an honorary Moms Demand Action volunteer already. And I just want to thank you for all you've done for the movement and being on the right side of history. It is braver than you imagine, because there are plenty of people in the media who have not been.
Well, you know, I'm in an enviable position. You know, a lot of those people are too afraid to speak out because they can't afford to alienate people. But at this point in my career, I feel a responsibility to stand up for what's right. And I know in my heart and with every fiber of my being that we all have to do something, because, you know, as you say, we think we live in safe communities, and people don't really understand this until they've been personally affected by gun violence. And that's why we all have to get involved and really stop the incidents of gun violence. And by the way, Shannon, I wish you would run for office. Do you think you might run for office?
I never say never. You know, I feel like we're making so much headway right now as an organization, but I spend so much time encouraging other women to run for office. It wouldn't be fair if I said no myself.
All right. Well, I'll be your press secretary.
Thank you so much.
Anyway,
I appreciate that.
I just want to say to all my followers, we really can make a difference. You know, I always think of that Margaret Mead quote about the power of committed citizens to change the world. Never underestimate the power of a small group of committed citizens to change the world. Indeed, that's the only thing that ever has. So I think if you feel powerless or helpless, but you're outraged and want to do something, really, there are many organizations. Moms Demand is an awesome organization. So please get involved. And thanks, Shannon, for everything you're doing and for your time today.
Thank you so much for shining a spotlight on this issue.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Shannon.
Bye.